Hi everybody, this is Leo Volont with the third and final part in this series, The Virgin Mary and a Love Story. This is the part you've been waiting for, so let's get started. So Mary was the culmination. She was the cloud of Elijah's prophecy come to end the drought, and the Messiah would not come completely unbeknownst or entirely in secret. The Gospels do us a bit of a disservice here, presenting the view that Jesus had to convince everybody of his messianic pretensions. But a great many people knew exactly who Jesus was and exactly what the design was for him. And they all knew who little Mary was, and she was treated accordingly. While other little girls played with dolls, she was taught Hebrew and was expected to study. The temple library was thrown open to her, and little Mary learned of all Jewish law and lore. Concerning little Mary, nothing was left to chance, and the messianic plans could at times become quite elaborate. Which leads us finally to the little love story I had promised you. Little Mary was to be mother to the Messiah, and so she needed a husband, if for no other reason than to preserve appearances. Although she herself was of the house of David, it was thought that her husband should also be of the house of David, though from a more remote branch of the family. The priests, in league with the brotherhood, arranged to find an acceptable husband. In selecting a husband for little Mary, they would again rely upon magic, but a somewhat more plausible magic than the Aaron's dead rod blooming in flower. What would happen this time was that all of the eligible bachelors of the house of David were assembled and given fresh cuttings from some tree or bush. The one who would be destined to wed Mary, well, his cutting would vivify and bloom while all the other cuttings remained dormant. Well, expectations were frustrated when all the cuttings remained dormant. The priest in charge of the ceremony was perplexed and inquired if every bachelor on the list was present. Well, an old bachelor, Joseph David, who did not wish to be married anyway, thought that those who preferred to remain single should be exempted, and so he just didn't show up. So he was immediately summoned and was compelled to come quickly. Free or in chains would be his only choice in the matter. And no sooner than when he arrived and they pressed a cutting into his hands, well, it shot forth in blooms like white lilies. And then as now, they symbolize purity. So voila, we had a winner. It was said that Our Lady, then a 14-year-old girl, asked for one of those lilies and had it pressed and saved it as a souvenir that she kept close by for the remainder of her life. Yeah, you know, it is quite possible that she really had loved that old guy. No, not so much for his passion, but maybe especially for his purity. Remember, Jesus was to be Spirit's child, not Joseph's. Now, in regards to the real bow of our story, well, most of the bachelors were there only because they had been asked to be, and few had entertained any great expectations for themselves, suspecting of their own unworthiness. But there were a few who considered themselves in serious contention, and they to various degrees emotionally invested themselves in the process, not the least reason for which may have been that little Mary, well, we should start calling her Miss Mary now, because she was then renowned to be quite a beauty. One young man in particular thought he had stood a particularly good chance. He felt he had all the best qualifications: noble breeding, wealth, capacity, and he lived as uprightly as can be expected of any young man with red blood flowing through his veins. So yeah, what wasn't to like about this exemplary young man? So So he was at first stunned and then heartbroken when Mary went to a reluctant old man who didn't seem to very eager to have her anyway. This young man became so disconsolate that he ended up by selling off his properties and becoming a member of that brotherhood. Disgusted with life, he would go into religious retirement and leave the world and all his disappointments behind. He would have been happy enough to grow old and die without another word ever being spoken of or to him. But such would not be the case, as we shall now see. It was correct that our young man had plenty of capacity, and with the world shut out to him, he had nothing left but virtue. At the monastery on the mountain, he proved himself to be a skilled and dedicated worker, and then an inspiring leader, and after 30 years found himself the superior of that order. Well, and this time Jesus had been born, had grown up, had his ministry, and had finally been murdered. The once solid following of Jesus split into violent factions, even while they were attacked from the outside by persecutors such as Paul. It was feared that Mary herself could be a target in the midst of all the trouble. So, to preserve Mary's safety, our young man, now an old man, in charge at Mount Carmel, with many men at his beck and call, well, he sent a covert delegation to quickly rescue her from the intrigues and conspiracies of Jerusalem and its environs. Our history doesn't go into much detail on this, so we can only guess what transpired. Did they offer her a polite invitation, which she graciously accepted? Or did they crash down her doors and ride away with her folded over their saddlebags? Don't know. We only know that when she arrived at Mount Carmel, she was ready to appreciate her stay. But what a life-punctuating moment it must have been for a young man, now an old man. After so many years with a broken heart, he was finally face to face with that girl, now a well-advanced lady whom he had fallen so much in love with decades before. Really, a lifetime before. A lot of water had passed under that bridge. Who knows what thoughts played in his mind? It said she recognized him instantly and asked him whether it didn't seem just like yesterday when they had met for the first time. Well, apparently it was exactly the best thing she could have said. It made him entirely forget for the moment all those years of disconsolation, loneliness, and heartbreak, and he became his young self again, if just for an instant. It made him smile, and her eyes sparkled. Well, isn't that love enough for us? Isn't it? Which brings us back to the question the angel had asked me, why Our Lady chooses to dress as a Carmelite. I thought maybe the answer was that she was showing her appreciation for the protection that the order had given her during her lifetime, as well as in gratitude for the care the order had taken of her family for those 7 ages since the time of Elijah. That all seemed like a reasonable enough answer. But it was far too surface, too obvious. It lacked elegance. I felt no validation from my angels, and my dreams were still being stirred up with hints and doubts, which I knew would have stopped had I gotten the right answer, right? So I kept the riddle on my mind and continued to think it over. And then after I don't know how long, the answer came so instantly that I'm not sure whether I thought of it or my angel finally just gave up and simply put the answer in my head. That Our Lady wears the habit of the Carmelites because the Carmelites predate and transcend the Catholic Church. Then I could say that it's a Jewish order, but that too is limiting after we consider that Elijah himself is not exactly Jewish. Elijah had simply wandered in one day from the hills with bears trailing behind him. He came to live with the Hebrews who didn't have either the strength or the courage to make him go away. He wasn't a member of any one of their 12 tribes. So Our Lady's wearing the Carmelite habit is expressive of her first loyalties that go beyond any particular religions or ethnicity, while recognizing the confluence of all of those other religious traditions. We are reminded that the Blessed Virgin is a Jewish girl and a Catholic girl, both at once, as well as carrying forward whatever religion it was that old Elijah had brought down with him from out of those hills and the caves of bears. Well, the answer is one thing, but after the answer, well, what was the lesson I was supposed to have learned? What was the angel's guiding purpose, and how was I changed by it all? Well, certainly so much thoughtfulness can never go entirely to waste. And what I came to feel might have been something akin to what the first crusading Carmelites had felt, that religion is supposed to contain elements more universal and more ancient than just their own particular religious traditions. But then there was also the lesson of that little romantic story I just told you about. You know, that perhaps any true religion needs to have some little bit of a love story behind it. You know, just think about it. There she is, Queen of Heaven, matron over millions of angels and thousands of saints. And she still wears the dress given to her by a rejected suitor who had still cared enough for her to ride off to her rescue. And maybe that too is religion. Thanks, everybody. I hope to have another video series planned soon. But bye-bye. Thank you.